Welcome everybody to another episode of Beyond the Wars. As you can see, we're in a different setup today. We're very blessed to be in Saint Shenouda's Monastery, joined with Abouna, Abouna Anthony. Thank you for joining us, Abouna.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yes, I'm Father Anthony Saint Shenouda from Saint Shenouda Monastery in Sydney, Australia, and it's good to be here.
Yeah, so today we're going to speak to you about monasticism, the life of monasticism, and the arrow prayer, which you specialize in, Abouna, we know. So I'll ask the first question, Abouna. What inspired you to become a monk, and how did you discern this calling?
It's a good question because a lot of people have the wrong idea about monastic calling. So when usually ask young people about monastic calling, they imagine it to be an angel came to me and said, you know, you're going to be a monk, or an angel came to my mom and said, oh, your son will be a monk, is one of ours, or one of these, scenarios that we often see in saints movies, which obviously happens to some people, but that's not the norm. This is not the general way of calling. When you look at Saint Anthony, the first monk, the one started monasticism, his calling was simply attending church, hearing the gospel reading, saying, if you want to be perfect, go sell all you have and come and follow me. It was very simple. Many people was at church. Until now, people at church hear this calling. So, it wasn't something extravagant. There wasn't something. So it's a good, I like to say this to start off with, so that because people sometimes have the wrong expectations. And when you have the wrong expectations, you might miss a calling. So if you have a calling for monastic life, but you say, the angel hasn't come yet, so maybe I'm not called to be a monk. There's no monk, there's no angel that comes to you, So me personally, it was basically coming and visiting the monastery, and I had the life of consecration in my mind, and that was always something I aspired to. Monastery here started the year I finished my high school, so I started visiting and regularly, and I like this form of consecration, being consecrated to God in the monastic life. The fact that everything that you do in the monastery is for God, so whether you're vacuuming the church, whether you're cleaning up, whether you're cooking, whether you're looking after a farm, it doesn't matter what you're doing and what job you do in the monastery, it's for the glory of God, and for the glory of His name. So that what inspired me to come to the monastery.
Abouna, did you have any experiences that you can share with us from transitioning into the life of the world to monasticism?
When someone shows interest in the monastic life, you don't just go to cold turkey, just jump in the monastery the next day. There's a whole period of visiting where you just visit the monastery to see what it's like, to see what is a monastery, what happens and who does what, and to get familiar with the fathers, the monastery fathers here, and to know who does what and how, and different personalities, and you learn because again, sometimes people read books, monastic books, and they have a different idea. Monastic books have the heroic stuff of monasticism, whereas it doesn't record the day-to-day things, and when you go to a monastery, obviously it's a day-to-day, monastery. Of course, there's heroic stuff, but there is there is an aspect of the day-to-day things where you just a normal life, day-to-day life. So that's why visiting the monastery is important, as well as reading monastic text. So there's a period of time when you visit, and so when you come to the monastery, when it comes to joining the monastery, that transition is not, it's a slow transition over time. It's not, you're doing something one day and all of a sudden there's a slow transition where you come and visit weekends, and you come visit a week or two, and so that transition becomes slower. So does that answer your question? Yeah.
So Abouna, in that regard, what was the most challenging part of embracing the monastic life, and how did you overcome it?
Sports, okay, and playing sports. Uh, basically, the one sport that I regret not playing before coming to the monastery is surfing. All right, so I loved going. I loved playing, trying different sports and stuff. And once before I joined the monastery, I went boogie boarding in one of the beaches. That was my first time. I don't know why I didn't try it so long ago. And I caught a good wave, and it was so exciting. It was so thrilling. I was just, it took me all the way to the beach, all the way to the sand. I'm like, man, can you imagine doing this standing up on a board? Like it was so good. Like the thrill of it was so good. That was, so that's one of my regrets, I guess. I should have done, again, surfers wear a black suit with a black, black. So, I mean, it can fit in, and they all got beads as well, surfers. So maybe I'll get away with it one day.
Yeah. Abouna, you mentioned Saint Anthony, obviously, earlier, being the first monk. In regards to your practices, prayers, and even your uniform, what is similar and what is, differed over time?
That's a good question. A lot of people compare monastic life in Australia. They ask the question, what's it compared to Australia? Or what's Australia compared to 4th century? Or what's Egypt 4th century to today? That's not a fair comparison. To compare lifestyle or to compare the monastic life, what you need to compare is the monastery inside the monastery in Australia with outside the monastery in Australia, or the monastery in Egypt with the society outside the monastery in Egypt now, or the 4th century monastery with the 4th century society, because it comes from society. Like the monks, the culture of the monks comes obviously from society. Obviously, there's differences. Like, of course, they live counter culture, counter society, but there is the aspects of it is the same. For example, having a fridge, for example, if you say to a monk in the 4th century, all these monks in the 4th century never had fridges. The monks today have fridges. Like, yeah, but everyone has a fridge. You know what I mean? That's not such an achievement, such an expensive. It's a necessity. It's not something. But when you compare, that's why I'm saying compare the monastery inside to the monastery outside. Saying that, the core of the monastic life is still there, which is your prayer rules, your prayer life, your how the monks behave together, the obedience. The main aspects of the monastic life are very, very similar to St. Anthony's time, St. Macarius' time, St. Macarius and St. Bohemius. This is what we learn from. These are the textbooks that guides our lives. They're the textbooks that we go back to on how to live life. So so the comparison, if you're going to compare in terms of spirituality and spiritual life, in terms of prayer rule and prayer life and all that stuff, of course it was a lot more rigorous, obviously, in Old Testament. In the olden days, but I mean it's still there as concepts and things like that. But as in day-to-day living, like things that you have, it's a bit different. Of course, it looks different from the outside.
Abouna, can you give us an example of what your day-to-day life looks like in terms of your prayer and how you spend your day? Because it might seem a bit weird to other people.
Yeah. So in the morning, there's 4:00 in the morning. You have praises, the psalmody, the tasbihah, and that's in the morning, 4 in the morning, and that goes for about an hour and a half, and you rest again, then you get up again at 9, and if we have masses every day, so you don't have to be at every mass, but you have allocated masses during the week, and 5:00 in the evening, you have a sunset prayers with all the psalms. We read the psalms together and we pray the psalms together. These are the common prayers that we pray as a group, as a community of monks. In between that, every person has their own. Every monk has their own thing, has their own prayers, has their own readings, has their own different jobs, has their own private prayers or private readings, whatever they have privately. But these are the things that we do in communion. So there's a communion aspect of prayer and there is individual aspect of prayer.
So, Abouna, I think this is a separate question, but I think in all the Christian movies, we always see the church bells, and we don't have it at our churches, but when we come to the monastery, we can hear it. And what's the significance of it rather than every monk waking up by themselves?
Yeah, it's very good. Again, observation. Churches in olden days were village churches, or churches that every village had a church, and the bell was the way of telling people. They didn't have alarm clocks or phones or whatever, so the bell was the way of calling people to come to church, come to prayer started. And it's just to show you how close churches were. If you couldn't hear the bell, that means you're not close to church. Like that means there's another church next to you, the other side. So bell is a calling to come to church. There is a bell that calls everyone here to church. So yeah, that's a function of the bell in the monastery, to call people to prayer, to call the monks to come and pray.
So in terms of silence and solitude, when you're at a monastery, most people imagine it, you're by yourself, you're living alone with God. How would you say that helps you grow? And are there any misconceptions about being alone?
Yes, there is one very big misconception about monastic life, and that is that monastic life, like that, monks get bored. Okay, and a lot of people don't even consider the monastic life, because they say, after 1 week, what I'm going to do after 1 week? You do whatever, and they think monks sitting there in their cell, like not looking for something to do. That cannot be further from the truth. It's not true at all. Monks have multiple jobs, multiple work and jobs to do around the monastery. Actually, we someone asked that question, and we have two brothers that just joined. When they first joined, they had just joined a month, into like they started like for a month, and someone asked that question, and we went back we get together for a meal together, and I said, yeah, they were asking me, the monks always get bored, and they're laughing their head off. They're just laughing and laugh, because they're being smashed with work. There's no such a thing as bored. Like, they don't even know what that is. So yeah, there is a misconception that monks, being in the monastic life is just, there's a lot of boredom, you don't know what to do. Again, that's not, you wouldn't last. No one can take. No one can take. So you have, like I said, that schedule, prayer schedule. You have your own work. Usually you have like 5-6 jobs, and you struggle to catch up day by day. And you say, okay, I'm going to finish these 3 today. And by the time you finish these 3, like there's another 5 that come up, and there's always something new. There's always something different to do. So the concept of being bored doesn't exist in monasticism. Do you sometimes get bored? Yeah, like everyone else. Like, you get bored and just, call one of the fathers or knock on their door. Like, let's have coffee. Let's do whatever. Let's go for a walk, or you yourself go for a walk or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, but this is not a life of boredom. It's not. Sometimes, yeah, every now and then, like, as a normal person does. But yeah, it's not a lifestyle of just being bored. That was the misconception. What was the question now? I forget the question.
I was just saying, how does solitude help grow your spiritual life?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, like being alone with God, of course, is the message. That's the whole reason people become monks. That's why people who join the monastery is to be alone with God. Saying that, that's not something you do from day one. So your first 10, 15 years, you're smashed with work. Yeah, and it's for your own good. That's what this is what the monastic fathers have taught us, and Bohemius and Carius and all these fathers. So St. Bohemius said, if you don't have any work, you dig up a hole and you fill it up again. It's work for the sake of work, not work for the sake of production or making something. So work is very important because it keeps you busy, keeps your mind busy. In terms of solitude, that comes in, like, yeah, not every monk lives the solitary life outside and alone. There are times when you're alone in your cell and you spend time with God. Of course, that's what you came for, but not first of all, not from day one. Okay, not after. Maybe after 10, 15 years, you start to get some leeway of, and that's healthy for you, because otherwise you won't last in the monastery. No one can, like, that imagined life of boredom is not, you can't last. You think St. Anthony living in the desert alone, do you think he was like bored of his brains like the whole time? He didn't have to be there. He was getting smashed by the devil. Unless he was actually spiritually being fed, spiritually being nourished from God, spiritually getting fulfilled and actually working and enjoying his time, he wouldn't have lasted. He wouldn't have lasted this. He stayed in the desert for 80 plus years, So, of course, it's a rewarding life, of course.
Well, are there any spiritual disciplines or like practices that you would recommend that you found for yourself or in general that have a profound impact on your spiritual life?
Yeah, the church fathers, the monastic fathers, all the fathers, the one thing that they always emphasize for any beginner is keeping a canon, a prayer canon, where you have a prayer canon that suits you and that you can grow into. So a prayer canon is you pray Psalms, you pray, you read the Gospels, you read whatever prayer canon that you have in terms of Matanias, in terms of whatever. And you keep that. Without a prayer canon, you cannot grow. You cannot say, "Yeah, I'll pray when I feel like it," because what ends up happening is you never feel like it. It's like saying, "I'm going to go to the gym when I feel like it." Gyms basically run on the fact that people sign up and never will go. Okay, that's the whole reason the gym industry is running. So it's the same with the prayer life. Like, unless you have a strong canon, prayer canon. That you are accountable to someone that you try to keep with all your heart, you're not grow. You can't grow.
Abouna, I remember as a child being really fascinated with the line in the middle of the hat, and I asked my priest at the time. I'm not sure how accurate this was. It's a while ago, but he said that Saint Anthony was tempted in the desert, and he split it apart, so he had to sew it back. So, what's the significance of maybe the line and the number of crosses and the design?
So basically, the story is correct, where Saint Anthony was being, beating up at the devil, and he ripped, so he went back and sewed it. So the idea is perseverance. He could have just gone. You got to put it in context. Imagine Saint Anthony. He 16-year-old. All right, left. His parents just died. Very rich man, young man. Him and his sister, and he's got all this money, all this wealth, all this land, and all this stuff. Okay, he could have used it for something wrong. He didn't. He sold it to go to live with God. Heard God's calling. Did God's calling. Then went to the desert. After that, he ticked all the boxes of someone who's amazingly spiritual, amazingly, wanting wanting to live with God. Then after that, a few months later, he gets smashed by the devil. All right. If imagine any of us, kept our prayer canon for a week, okay, and we had some small tribulation, failed an exam or something after a week of doing your canons. Can you imagine how much, how upset you would be? Oh God, and I'm going to be an atheist, and what's the point of all this? What's the point of going to church? What's the point of prayer? But he didn't. For him, the devil, after all these amazing things that he did, he got attacked, ripped. Then what happened? He went back and started again and started his life again. He didn't give up. So that's what it's a reminder of. That you never give up. You always be strong. Also, in the olden days, this is what the children used to wear. So it's a Saint John Cassian. That's what he says. I don't know if you've seen 1700 kids where they wear this funny hat with the flaps coming out at the front, but olden days that's what kids used to wear. So it's keeping a childish mind, a child mind of a child. It also has the helmet, being a helmet, an analogy of a helmet. But so that's what this is about. Of course, it's got the 6 crosses.
So why
each
6?
side. The disciples.
Oh,
no,
okay.
12. 6 and 6. So 12, yeah. And one cross at the back, which is Jesus. So, your thoughts and your, it's according to the Bible, according to the apostles and Christ.
And as well, I know, it's very common for monks to be wearing black, but what's the reason behind wearing black?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's a cool color. I'm not sure. Actually, in early times, again, John Cassian. So John Cassian is an early saint who came from France. And he went to Egypt and wrote about the monastic life in 2 books, one called The Conferences, one called The Institutes. Mm-hmm. So The Conferences is where he dialogued with a lot of people, a lot of desert monks about different topics. And he recorded all these dialogues about spiritual topics. And The Institutes is about his encounter, and he recounts how many times they prayed, what they said, what they wore, how they worked, bit details of what they did. And so what was the question? Where did we start? The black. Okay, so he actually explicitly mentions that they wore white. Yeah, so early monks used to wear white. Saint Anthony used to wear white. How they were black, I think it came with Islam coming to Egypt. I think that so basically the Muslim clerics used to wear white. So they wanted to, as a sort of persecution, they wanted to make the Christians stand out. So they told them to wear black, and they have a turban with different color and things like that. So it was a sort of persecution, but we're proud of it. We're proud of it. That's why our priests also wear black as well.
Well, I'm a bit curious on the process in becoming a monk. Do you have to be well educated, or is there months of being in the monastery? What's the process like?
Yeah. Basically, education is good, is important, but more important is to be successful. So you don't have to, not necessarily in education, but as long as you're a successful person, this is not a way of escaping the world. You're not escaping, poverty, or escaping something. You're here for Christ. You're here for Jesus, to live with Him. That's the main thing. That's the most important thing. So, and that you show that by being successful, and being successful, you come join a monastery. That's a token of that, or that's how you show. So it doesn't have to be a degree. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have a PhD to come into the monastery, but you have to be successful in what successful business, successful in your education, whatever it is you do.
Well, now, how does monasticism differ between different religions, and what separates us kind of from that?
Yeah, monasticism is a life that you go after Christ. So the monks see their whole life is the 40 days that Jesus spent in the desert. Okay, the 40 days and 40 nights. What did he spend it in? Prayer and fasting and prayer, and that's what the monks do. They live in the desert, and they live fasting and prayer. What do even when you look at the three trials that the devil tempted Jesus with, are the exact things that the monastic vows. Poverty, obedience, and celibacy. They the ones, desires of life, the pride, and being the money, like I gave you all these kingdoms. So they coincide with that. So the monk's life is a life after Jesus in the 40 days in the desert. That's not a coincidence. This is just living in Christ Jesus, as St. Paul calls it, and so that's very different, very, very different from any other religion. So my aim is not to mortify the body, or my aim is not to subject the body and ascetic life, and to make that's not our aim. Our aim is to live with Christ. To the person of Christ, and to live with Him, and to grow in Christ, and to be in unity with Christ. So, which is very, very, very different from any other monastic thought or monastic ideal outside of Christianity.
So what about within Christianity? How would monasticism differ between the different denominations?
Well, there's no monasticism in Anglicanism or in Protestantism, so that eliminates them too. In the Catholic Church, there is. So in the Catholic Church, there is a orders of monasticism, where some orders they serve in hospitals, others serve in schools. Like the Franciscans, or the ones that the nurses, or the teachers at schools, or and so on, like the Maris brothers in schools and things like that. So they have different callings within monastic life, whereas in Orthodox monasticism, it's purely devotional. So you go to the monastery to be in the monastery, to live with God in the monastery. It's mainly devotional rather than serving outside.
So I know you were saying you went to Mount Athos a bit recently, and you were saying you could still tell between the different denominations, between monks in Orthodoxy. So how could you tell? Basically?
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, that you compare life here in Australia inside the monastery to outside the monastery, and Egypt inside the monastery and outside the monastery, and Greece inside the monastery and outside the monastery. So actually, what I saw was that the monastery there, 95 or 98% is exactly the same in terms of prayer rules, in terms of church life, in terms of community, the monks, playing pranks on each other, and it's pretty much the same. And they have this buckets, and they have everything that we have, coffee time, and they sneak each other to have coffee, and it's very much the same. In terms of culture, in terms of course, it's different, and every culture is different, and that's, you have to accommodate. But that's not the monastic culture; that's just a Greek culture, like the Greek monks there. So, so in terms of monastic essence, which is awesome, this is an amazing thing to consider, because we come from the same origins. The early monks of Egypt. This is the exact same origins. So even though we've been separated that long, but we still come from the same origins. We still retain these origins, like this common spirituality between us. So that's beautiful. That's an awesome thing. It was very impressive to see that there's so much more that unites us and divides us.
Okay, we wanted to move on to the topic of the arrow prayer. We know you're considered a doctor of theology, and
not theology, but anyway.
And if I'm not mistaken, you write your PhD thesis and also a book on the topic of the arrow prayer. So, what is the arrow prayer, and what is its origins and significance?
Okay, so arrow prayer is, people sometimes confuse it with the Jesus prayer. Arrow prayer is a short prayer that monks or laity, so not just monks, laity, pray throughout the day, doing different activities in the day. So not specifically doing one or the other activity. So that's the definition of the arrow prayer. The Jesus prayer comes under the arrow prayer as one of the arrow prayers. So the arrow prayer does not have to be Jesus, does not have to have the name Jesus in it. It can be one of the Psalms, it can be one of the Bible verses. It doesn't have to be. Even some of the Desert Fathers say it can be one of the sayings of the Desert Fathers, one of their fathers' advice to them. And it's something that you repeat throughout the day. You keep repeating in your mind throughout the day, while you're walking, while you're coming down, while every aspect of your day is filled with this prayer to change you. The idea of prayer in 4th century was they got it from the education system at the time, because prayer is kind of education. You learned, so in education, and there was 3 stages to education. The first one is to have knowledge. Okay. Second step is to interiorize this knowledge, to make it inside you. Okay. And the third step is to practice this knowledge, to put it into practice. Okay. Again, very different from today's concept of education, where you just shove information in your brain and just bring it out on a paper. Okay. That's very, very different. Okay. So when you learn something, you learn a new concept, there has to be a way of interiorizing this. And the way to do that is by repeating it again and again and again and again in your mind, and to keep repeating it, because that's how you learn. That's how you make it inside you. So when you're repeating verses about any topic, it makes it your own, it makes it your way of life. Then you go off and practice it. So if you're about forgiveness and you repeat something about forgiveness, then you go off and practice it. So that's what they use. That's so kind of the arrow prayer, that you're repeating all these Bible verses, different Bible verses, that your prayer becomes the way you act, ultimately becomes your act. So I learn all these Bible verses, okay? So I keep repeating them to interiorize them into my heart. Then after that, I practice them in my day-to-day life. So it's not just about learning. It's not just about keeping busy. It's about life. It's about day-to-day life, about action. So it's not just a prayer. So that prayer started obviously not from the desert monks, desert fathers. It started from St. Paul. He said, "Pray without ceasing." Okay. Now we know that St. Paul was not speaking to monks, because monasticism hasn't started, in the 1st century. I hope you knew that. Yeah. The other thing is that he was not talking to, so he wasn't talking to monks. He expected everyone to be able to do it. So it wasn't something that's completely out there that undoable, because he wouldn't have said it. And he says, pray without. It's an imperative. It's not if you can or when you have time, or it's pray without. It's a command. Okay, so there were practical ways of doing it, praying it, and these practical ways is just to pray throughout the day. Basically, have a prayer when you're doing anything in life. Saint Shenouda has a very interesting sermon where he talks to the monks, and he says to the monks, when you wake up in the morning, say Jesus. When you walk to your to church, you say Jesus. When you come back from church, you say Jesus. When you go to work, you say Jesus. When you come back from work. So basically, every step of the way, you say Jesus. You always have the name of Jesus in your mind. This is Saint Shenouda, the Archmage, okay, 4th century, and he was giving the same, like the talk, to monks and laity. Then he turns to the laity, and he goes to the laity, and he says to them, when you wake up in the morning, you say Jesus. When you have when you bring up your children, you say Jesus. When you do so and so, you say. When you come in, when you're running away from barbarians, you say Jesus. When you're running, and he has a whole list of situations where you mention the name Jesus. You mention it again and again throughout the whole day. And I think if Saint Shenouda was giving this sermon today, he would be saying, when you wake up, you say Jesus. When you catch a bus, you say Jesus. When you go to the gym, you say Jesus. When you're in the shower, you say Jesus. Just everyday thing that we do. When you study, you say Jesus. When you get in trouble at school, you say Jesus. So yeah, that's what he would be saying. Like every aspect of your life is saying the name Jesus.
Is there a reason it's called the arrow prayer?
Yes. So the actual name, we don't actually have that name. It does not exist in church history until the 1900s. Okay, when it's actually named by that name. But the description of it by being arrow goes back all the way to Origen, all the way to early church fathers, but not the name. So, for example, Origen says, small, intense prayers like an arrow that goes, you know what I mean? So he describes the whole thing. He doesn't give it the name arrow prayer, but he describes the whole thing as an arrow. Why is it called arrow? Because short and it's quick. So sometimes it's described as attacking the devil. So one of the church saints, Saint John of Skeet, he saw a vision where that vision is the devil appeared to him, and he's got all these arrows on him. He's full of arrows everywhere. And the saint asked him, "What's this? What are you doing?" What he goes, "These are arrows." He goes, where'd you get these arrows from? What are they? Why are you full of arrows? Because you don't know. This is arrows. These are the prayers that you pray all day. That you've been praying all day. So it's like I said, arrows that attack the enemy. Attack the devil.
That's really good. So I like how you mentioned school. And so as students, how can we benefit from the hour prayer? So I'll give you a scenario.
Yep.
So what if we're like doing our math exam? It's the last question. It's already like really difficult. And we say the hour prayer. We continually say the hour prayer, but we're still not getting the solution. Do we say that's it? It just didn't work for me? Or how can we deal with that?
Okay. So generally, this is just prayer in general. Yes, we can pray in hard times and difficult times. We should persist in it. Like regardless of how hard the test is, we should start the test with it. Going to the test, we should be praying it into the test, throughout the test. So it's not about getting the right answer. Okay, I know as students, like we do anything to get the right answers, but it's about having a relationship with God. It's not about getting the right answers or getting a parking spot when you go shopping the shops, or that's not what prayer is about. Okay, it's about a relationship with God. So, do I pray? Yes, I do. Even if I don't get the answers, of course. If I don't get the answers, so yes, I always pray. I always pray, even if I don't get the answers. I always pray before an exam. I can stop during an exam and say it and continue doing the exam every now and then between every question. It doesn't have to be something Like you don't have to stay for 15 minutes doing it like just 2 words, in your mind. And that's why the good thing about it is that it's short and concise, and you can say it in your mind. It's the whole idea of the arrow. So if you don't get the answer, you still pray it. That means you need to study a bit more.
How can the arrow prayer complement our other prayers and Bible reading? And also, should we be making our own prayers from our Bible readings, or do we just search up church father arrow prayers, or look for ones that are already made?
No, the idea of the arrow prayer is that it's organic. Like you're praying the Psalms, you're enjoying them, you're interacting with them, and you like a prayer. For example, one of the John Cassian, again going back to John Cassian, he says, "Oh Lord, come to my rescue, oh God, Lord God, to my help." This is the beginning of Psalm 69, I believe. So he repeats that all the time, and he says, when you wake up in the morning, when you go to sleep, again, it's something that he uses all the time. So if I'm in the morning prayer and I'm reading my prayers and praying my prayers from the Agbeya, from the Psalms, and I like a verse that stands out to me that day, I just keep repeating it that day. One of the fathers from Sydney, he says that he reads the Bible before he goes to sleep, and he picks a psalm and a verse, and he keeps on repeating it to go to sleep. And he sometimes wakes up, finds himself just repeating that verse again and again in his mind. So there are different ways of obviously doing it, but the whole idea is to make it permeate everything of your life, like every aspect of your life. Like I said, the bus and the gym and the exam and whatever, being in detention,
Abouna, how can we know that the arrow prayer is effective? Because usually when we're in prayer, it's supposed to be like a communication between us and God. So when we're just speaking to him and saying a short prayer every few minutes, we might not hear his voice.
It's a very good question. Look, it's some fathers, they liken the arrow prayer to a child. Okay, a child may not say comprehensible sentences and arguments, but they can just say the same word again and again and to get their father's attention. What, drink, and they just keep saying the same word again and again, and they get the father's attention that way. So it's one of the ways of communicating with God, that you just keep saying the same thing again and again. And while you're saying it, you're lifting up your life to God, your heart to God. And it doesn't have to be asking something. Our prayer can be how magnificent God is, how amazing He is, how thankful you are to Him, and how for all that He has done in my life. So it doesn't always have to be asking for stuff. It can be and you repeat that again and again and again. Like I said, when you do that, it becomes part of who you are, and it shows in your action. So if you're it's a Thanksgiving. It becomes you interiorize it that I am thankful. Then your life, the way you walk in life, like I don't need anything. I don't desire anything because I already have. So it dictates how you walk in life. So it's not just about saying the words. It has a lot more to do with your way of life, and changes your way of life.
So one last question for today. You invest a lot of time in Saint Shenouda's Monastery press as well, and publishing books. So I wanted to ask if you were to recommend a book for like each time of life. So for children, for teens, for young adults, for parents maybe, and to end, your favorite book.
Saint Shenouda Press. If you're not following Saint Shenouda Press, I'll tell you which ones are popular ones. The really popular ones are the teen series, and they are popular with especially the liturgy and the Holy Week ones. They're very, very popular. Because it explains the liturgy really well, and it explains different parts, and how and the way it's written is that it doesn't just explain it; it explains what we do and how we interact with it. So it's not just that's what's happening and that's it. It's because that's the whole point of the liturgy, that you interact with it. The same with the Holy Week one, Holy Week for teens, where people like to go to Holy Weeks, and there's so many things happening at the same time, and it helps you understand what's going on that's happening around there. We have, of course, kids series and different saints, lives of saints. We have the adult series. In one of the adults ones that again a lot of people enjoy is the Father Skanda, Athanasius Skanda, from Canada. He has a book called Practical Spirituality, and that's one of the amazing books that people love. It's again, a lot of good reviews on that book. So yeah, they're the different. If you like saint stories, which I think a lot of people like these days. So when I ask a lot of young people, tell me 3 things you know about Saint Anthony, and they usually tell me his name is Anthony. Okay, and that's all they know about him. But you need to know saint stories, lives of saints, and what they did. So we have a few books that have Saint George and Abu Sufyan, Saint Mary, contemporary ones as well. So I think it's important to know these lives of saints because they inspire us. They inspire us to, and it is inspiring, especially martyrs as well. Especially nowadays that everything's against us, in terms of the world outside. It really is important to know that there are people there that sacrifice not just a job or marks or degrees or whatever. They sacrifice their life for Christ. So it really is important time to read and be immersed in these lives of saints because again it dictates our lives.
Do you have any? Yeah.
Well, there's 2 books. One is called The Arena. It's not from Shenouda Press. So there's a book called The Arena. That's a really good book, and it's about monastic life, how it's based on the Bible, like how to base your life basically on the Bible. But another book is called what's it called? I forget. Prayer. No, it's about prayer, but I missed the name. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, the Bible. Yeah, the Bible, of course.
Do you have any upcoming book projects?
Yes, we do have a whole list coming up. We have what do we have? We have Father Carlos from St. George Church. He has a book on joy that's really exciting. We have Abouna wrote a book on prayer. Very, very exciting as well. It's a very good book. So basically it talks about different rooms of prayers, how we can, each room of the house is dedicated to a prayer or like symbolizes a prayer. We have Prayer Life, Orthodox Prayer Life by Father Matta. We have a new translation coming out. So there's a few exciting things coming out. There's a liturgy book for kids as well, like the part 2 for that. So we try to get a variety like kids, adults, teens. And,
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. It's a pleasure to see you, and I pray all the success, and God bless you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Abouna.